Hopefully you can hear the sound of my lovely voice. And as you're getting settled, we got more folks logging in. I just want to say thanks for being here. And I do want to emphasize there's a chat function. So hopefully you have access to that. I know sometimes if the chat isn't working, if it doesn't appear, you might have to log out and then log back in to be able to access the chat function. But that's a great way to ask any questions or offer any comments or input as we start today's session. Also encourage you, if you don't have one already, some sort of note-taking method. If you have a pen and paper next to you, if you have a different window open on your computer where you take notes, definitely want to give you a moment right now to try to get that organized. And then, as everybody's getting logged in, if you can take a moment and in the chat function, if you can type out your name and what city department or county agency you belong to, and then there's a question just to get us started, just to get the wheels turning. And that question is, how can differences impact a workplace? So feel free to throw in your name, your department agency, and then your response to that opening question in the chat function. And we're having folks getting settled in, so we'll give you a quick moment for that. Welcome, everybody. We have the instructions on the screen there. And we'll give you a few moments to type out your responses in the chat while others get logged in, and then we'll get started here in just a moment.
I see lots of people typing.
Welcome, Amy. Welcome, Bridget. Yeah, very, very interesting responses. I like that. Help you see issues from multiple angles. Okay, we'll come back to that. Learning new things, wonderful. And for those logging in, we have the instructions on the screen. Welcome to today's session. In the chat, please type your name, department or agency, and then the question to get our brains started for today's session is, how can differences impact a workplace? Excellent. And please keep on typing your chat response. We're about to get started, and hopefully you can see me flip the slide here. There it is. Let me get my tech in order. And okay, now we're cooking with gas here. Elevate your impact. September 4th, bridging differences. This is an important topic, and it has many important layers to it. So thank you all for taking the time to be here today. Just so you know, this session will be recorded. So if you do want to revisit it, we'll have that recorded. But we'll kick off with a couple of introductions. So controlling the technology, we have Christy Hernandez. She is the division leader from the Learning and Organizational Development team here in Human Resources. So shout out to Christy for controlling the tech on this first part. And then she's actually going to be leading a portion of today's session as she introduces us to some very interesting behavior styles. So stay tuned for that. My name is RJ Vega, and I'm the Culture and Organizational Development Manager here at Human Resources for the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County. Between the two of us, Christy and I have been working on the Elevate Your Impact Lunch and Learn series throughout the year, so we hope you're enjoying it. And we're actually honored to have a couple of guests from well, I'll keep it a secret. I want to build it up a little bit, so I'll leave you in suspense for now. But stay tuned, because we do have some non-HR guests joining today's session and sharing some of their expertise with us. So what we'll cover today, and again, for those who have joined late, please feel free to, in the chat, type out your name, your department, your agency, and then the opening question is how can differences impact the workplace? All right, today's agenda, we'll talk about the concept of bridging differences, and there's a couple approaches to this. So I want to provide some definition, some clarity of what we mean by bridging. And then we'll talk a little bit about the benefits and how bridging differences and working towards that can have some tangible impacts in a positive way to our workplace and to our teams. We will explore some different behavior styles. So we're talking about human beings and our behaviors, and a really interesting portion on that Christy will lead us in today. And then we'll actually hear from a team here within Lincoln and Lancaster County that is doing a lot of the work to help support the bridging of differences. So stay tuned. We have an action-packed agenda, and I see the chat has been going furiously with some awesome responses, so I'm very eager for that. All right. Now, with the question today, the opening question, how can differences impact a workplace? You know, I'm seeing all kinds of really interesting thoughts here. It looks like I give you a broader understanding. Thank you, Marianne. Different perspectives. A few of you have listed different perspectives on there, and that's definitely a powerful impact. Efficient communication. Shout out to Roy Rivera. That's a very cool thought. Multiple angles from Bridget, LPD. Wonderful. So I like where everybody's going with this. You know, overall morale, make it a more welcoming and belonging sort of environment. You know, sometimes when we think about differences, our minds might go to somewhere where it's like, oh, there's like a divide. Maybe there's a little bit of tension. And conversely, our minds can sometimes land on, well, hey, there's a lot of different perspectives, a lot of strength, and a lot of different viewpoints that can help, you know, whatever our particular team or workplace is focusing on. So I appreciate you all submitting those thoughts. And again, utilizing the chat function, I want you all to take a moment and just put down, what do you observe in this picture on the screen? What are you seeing on there? What sticks out to you? Throw out some responses in the chat, please. We'll give you a moment to do that. What are you seeing, or what does it make you think of as you look at that image? Excellent. So yep, I see a bridge, peaceful setting. See it's yeah, easier path over a rough terrain, connecting both sides. Okay, yep, see some green, see some forest, see some risk. Risk for rot. Okay, yep. Exactly. No, I think you're all spot on, you know, with this image, and what stuck out to me and why I wanted to incorporate that into today's session is because there's a richness to this, and with that richness there is some complexity. So when we talk about a bridge, you might see, yes, it's bridging a divide, and in that divide there are some rocks, and it can be a little risky if you want to try to get across, if you want to, you know, try to continue on with your journey. And you know, with those, when you try that, if there isn't a bridge there, there's probably going to end up being some sort of stress. Like, gosh, if I really need to try to get across, I got to figure this out. This seems like I might, you know, I don't want to injure myself. Really increases the level of uncertainty, level of stress you might feel. So when we talk about bridging differences, you know, we really want to focus on what we can do to help not only build that bridge, but also invite some level of understanding, some level of acknowledgement. And that isn't always the easiest thing in the world. Now, in a previous work life, I was fortunate to help some of the work that involved helping new Americans get better acclimated to the particular community here in Nebraska that they were now residing in. So I got to learn from a lot of cool local leaders, but in that sort of space, I also learned it's one part is, yes, helping new community members learn and get connected and acclimated to whatever that community has, you know, whatever services, whatever resources and connections, but also an important part is ensuring that the receiving community is doing a good job of being inviting and being willing to learn from those who are joining that particular, town or city. And it was through that sort of work that I got to learn about an organization called Welcoming America. And it was through them that they recommended a resource that I'm going to reference today. And so that resource, and I took some of what we'll talk about from this, but it goes a lot deeper into things beyond the workplace. So for today, we'll kind of just focus on the workplace. But the Bridging Differences Playbook. Okay, there's the Greater Good Science Center, and this is out of the University of California, Berkeley. Now, what they do there is they study the psychology, sociology, and neuroscience of well-being and teaches skills that foster a thriving, resilient, and compassionate society. Okay, so again, this resource is available online. And the resource that the organization I referenced earlier is called Welcoming America, but it was through them that they connected me with this particular playbook. But the reason why I want to reference that in today's conversation is because it did a really cool job of explaining the concept of bridging differences. So bridging is about understanding. Okay, understanding. And the goal is to try to understand someone else's viewpoint, perspective, style, or preference. And this is important, even if it is not your own. Even if your viewpoint, your perspective, your style is different. But here's the thing. While you might not share that particular perspective or style, work style, whatever the case may be, it is important that you try not to dismiss them, because once that door gets shut, it's very hard to reestablish that trust and that communication to try to arrive at a place of problem solving. So instead, dig deeper if you can and try to understand, with respect, and appreciate the where and the why behind their particular view, style, preference, or whatever the case may be. And the challenge, though, it's easier said than done, because sometimes this can require asking questions and a willingness to suspend judgment. And that is not always the easiest thing in the world, especially if whatever the disagreement is maybe a high stress situation. Maybe you have a deadline. Maybe it's something that's very core to your values. So it's not the easiest thing in the world. But when we talk about bridging differences, we are not talking about persuasion. We're not talking about convincing the other person that you're right and your way is the way to do this. So with that said, the common ground and the compromise, those are effective goals to strive toward, but sometimes you might not always achieve that. Sometimes there might not even be that resolution. This can take time. And I know that many of us might think, and myself included, those big, grandiose, thoughts and revelations and actions are where my mind goes. But really, when we talk about bridging differences, this is a game of shifts, small steps, where you might not change a particular mind or a particular, viewpoint, and that's okay. But by at least planting a seed, you can hopefully lay the groundwork for something, much bigger later on down the road. But something that we don't always talk about enough when we talk about differences is starting with our basic recognition of our shared humanity. We may be coworkers, we may be teammates, somebody might be a manager, a supervisor, somebody might be an individual contributor. But at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And when we can have and start with that shared humanity, we can attempt to learn from one another, acknowledge one another, have those constructive dialogues, and hopefully start problem solving together. Because we all have those needs, we all have those tastes, those goals, those worldviews, and we also all have to work together. We work together, and there's a lot of benefits in doing so. Here in the workplace, we spend a lot of time in our jobs, 40 plus hours in some cases, depending the time of year. I know y'all have different roles and have different work schedules. But really, we all contribute to this workplace culture and we spend a lot of time here. So if we can try to build that positive, respectful culture, then that's one less thing to have to focus on. And when we talk about reducing stress, your particular job and your role may have a lot of stress by the nature of it. Having to deal with the stress of differences among those teammates that you may need to rely on. And when you don't address those things, when you let them fester, that is where that can really impact the stress. And as as we all know, the impact of stress has a bodily response, has a mental health response. So hopefully we can reduce stress. Hopefully we can improve our sense of health, but also the output of services that we're providing, the sense of teamwork, the efficiency. And then, yes, we all have our strategic plans, our goals, whatever projects we have to deliver. So hopefully we can better build on that progress towards that. So again, when we talk about bridging differences, and Christy is about to show us a couple of behavior styles that'll really help us. But I really just want to emphasize the benefits of working to bridge the differences, starting from a place of that shared humanity and really working towards the understanding, of one another. Because as local government, we each have in our departments and our agencies, we have that very important and necessary function or service to all residents in our community. And each of us, whether we're a director, whether we're a supervisor, manager, whether we are an individual contributor, we each have a role in that workplace community. And so with that said, I'll switch things over to Christy and she'll introduce us to the next portion.
Okay, thank you. So, RJ, if you want to stop sharing, then I'm going to share my screen. Hi, everybody. Glad you could be here with us. Just need a second to get things set up where I need them. Okay. You're seeing my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So RJ kind of kicked this off, and it was really interesting to see that intro, RJ. Thank you. Because I think this just feeds so well into that idea of, when we're trying to bridge differences, we're not trying to change other people's minds. We're not trying to persuade them or make them see it our way. And so what I'm going to show you today, I think it just really lends itself to that. So we're going to be looking at 4 key behavior styles that we encounter in the workplace and the unique strengths of each one. And I want to also give you a minute at the end of my segment to think about, first of all, which aspects of these styles you recognize in yourself, but then also which ones might complement your style. Because as we're thinking about all of those benefits that RJ was just talking about, the way that we can get those benefits is if we can really learn to work well together and leverage and make the most of the differences within our team. So at the opening, RJ mentioned that it would be good to have something to write with. If you could have a blank piece of paper out during this segment, I would really recommend it because there are a few things that I'll invite you to draw. But before we do that, I want to hear from you. So this is a chat question, and I want to know if you had to describe your work style in one word, what would it be? So let me know in chat, a few of the ideas that come to mind. And I think this is hard when you have to think of only one word, but maybe it's efficient or methodical, or some people might feel like they're chaotic a little bit in their work style. So what would you say is your work style? So I'm seeing busy and detailed, resilient, organized. Absolutely. Organized and need variety. I feel that way, Allison. Structured, attention to detail. Okay. Yeah, and proactive. Good. I love seeing all the different words pop up because it just shows how many unique styles are represented in this group. And that's really what bridging differences is all about for us. We all have natural styles that influence how we approach work. And of course, our approach won't be the same as all of our coworkers, right? And sometimes that can cause friction. Even when we appreciate the way our coworkers do things, it can still cause some friction. So let's think about that for just a minute. What are some differences that could create friction at work? So again, I want to hear from you in chat. One of the examples for me that comes to mind is like the amount of detail that we need. That's an area that could cause friction. You know, imagine if you're a big picture kind of person and you're working with somebody that is just really focused on the detail. You're kind of speaking different languages, you know, or you need different levels of information to be able to do your work. And so that's something that can cause some friction. So I want to see what you're thinking here. Amy said waiting for needed items. Yeah. I see some other folks typing. So speed of delivery. Yeah, I think maybe that's kind of similar to what you were thinking too, Amy. Communication styles, absolutely. Lack of or inadequate contribution, okay. Frequent interruptions, oh, that's a good one because some people kind of thrive on just having a lot going on, and others that's just draining and it's kind of a game changer for them. Oh, delivering or not delivering what was promised, that's a good one, Roy, thank you. So yeah, there's such a variety of things that like one person might thrive with one way and one person just needs something completely different. You know, these are all differences that can create challenges for us in the workplace. And the way that we do things feels normal, right? The approach that I have feels normal to me. And so when we're working with people who do things differently, we might think that their way is kind of the wrong way, but really their approach is just normal for their style. And when we can start to understand those differences and where they're stemming from, that it can help us bridge those differences and work better together. So I'm going to introduce a framework today that describes 4 basic behavior styles. And the one that I'm going to use today is, the tool is called the Birkman method. I would say that this is like the lesser known cousin of DISC or Myers-Briggs. You know, I think those are ones that we hear of and use a lot of times at work. And in fact, I use DISC here at the City of Lincoln. But I really like Birkman. You're going to find, if you're familiar with DISC, you'll find that Birkman is very similar. But I really like how Birkman represents all the styles in a really positive light. I think that's very important and especially important for what we're doing here today. So that's the one that I chose for what we look at today. So have your piece of paper out. There are 2 continuums of personality that we're going to look at. And so the first one looks at how we communicate and interact with other people. And we can think about it in terms of extroversion and introversion. That's just kind of a really common way for us to think about it. So people who have extroverted styles tend to be outgoing and sociable. They're assertive, open, and direct communicators. So I want you to kind of key in on that. It's the direct communication that a lot of times is really important here. Now, people who have introverted personalities tend to be more reserved and quiet. They're more thoughtful, low-key, and indirect in the way that they communicate. Introverts recharge by being alone, which, you know, compared to extroverts who recharge being around other people. So those are a couple of differences. But what I'd like you to do is just draw this line, this continuum, and then plot where you see yourself on that continuum between extroverted and introverted communication and interaction styles. So just draw a little dot where, knowing yourself, where you think you would fall. And then we're going to take a look at the other continuum. So the second continuum represents what we focus on. So there's task-oriented people who are concerned with productivity and efficiency. They approach work in a more factual and objective manner. And then in contrast, those who are more people-oriented on the other side of the continuum are concerned with building relationships. So they approach work in a more subjective and relational way. Those who are people-oriented focus on the needs of others, whereas people who are task-oriented focus on their to-do list and getting things done. So where do you see yourself on that continuum? Go ahead and plot yourself on that second one as well. Okay, and then I've got a little poll for you because I want to see what you're thinking here. I'm going to launch this poll. And I'd like you to let me know which combination best describes where you placed yourself on the two continuums. So did you find yourself kind of in that extrovert task combination, or the introvert task, or extrovert people, introvert people, or were you more near the middle? So select yours and click submit. Okay, so we've got quite a few people on the call who are a little bit of a mix here. Introvert and task is one of the highest votes, but then also in the middle. And I think that's really, that's a nice mix for people who kind of find themselves in the middle. It's easy to flex as needed when you are in the middle. So that's great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and finish that poll, and you can close out of that. Now let's keep moving on this because when we start to combine these two elements, how we interact and what we pay attention to, then 4 styles really start to come into focus. So let me explain each of the styles and give you some Birkman shorthand to help you remember them. First, we'll look at the combination of a person who is task and detail focused and has an outgoing, assertive style of interacting. So the shorthand from Birkman for this style is a doer. Doers get things done with their hands and the physical. They're like really in there and they're dealing with the physical world. Okay? Now, when you combine a person that has that same outgoing, assertive style, but is people-focused, you get a communicator. Communicators get things done through building relationships with people. Now I'm going to continue clockwise. And so if we combine someone who is people-focused with a more reserved and slow-paced style of interacting, we get what Birkman calls a thinker. So thinkers work with ideas and concepts. And then the last one, a person who is reserved and slower paced and focuses on tasks, is referred to as an analytical. Analytical people work with rules and structure. Now, sometimes people fit really clearly into one of these areas, but really we're kind of all a mix of all of them to some extent. But now that you've heard these shorthand descriptions, I know that was super light, but now that you've heard just that shorthand, I'm curious which one you initially feel most closely connected to. So let me know in chat what stands out for you. Okay, so got a couple of analyticals. Amy's still in the middle. Communicator, Marianne says doer. Yeah, sometimes these feel so true, right, Marianne, when we can really see ourselves? Okay, thinkers, analytical and thinkers. So we've got some that kind of see themselves mixed a little bit. Allison, you're stuck a little bit. Well, so guess what? I have a little bit more information that I'm going to provide to you. So we'll see if this kind of makes a difference. I'm trying to move my chat window over just a little bit. Okay, So let's keep moving, and I'm going to add another layer onto this for you. And so here, what we're going to talk about is what we typically see when we're observing each of the different styles. And so with Berkman, this is referred to as usual behaviors. And one of the things that I think is interesting about usual behaviors with Berkman is that the way that we behave, a lot of it is like, this is just how we are, right? This is how we've been ever since we were born. But also our usual behaviors are things that we've learned, because, here we all are, we're in jobs, we've been working for who knows how many years. I feel like I've been working for a million years. And so I've seen things, I've seen other people be successful doing certain things, and I've adopted some of those things. So there might be things that aren't really like naturally part of my style, and yet I've picked them up because I've seen other people being successful, and so I wanted to do that too. And so Berkman kind of measures that, and we get usual behaviors. So we're going to go into that a little bit, and we will start with the doers. So doers are generally detail-oriented but impatient. So they like detail, but they don't have time for it. Doers like results, they like practicality, and they like action. Either they want to take action or they want to see action happening. They're decisive, straightforward, and doers could come across a little bit forceful. So as you hear that, you may be thinking, oh, that's me. Or you might be thinking, oh yeah, I know people who are kind of like that. Okay, we're going to keep moving clockwise. So communicators focus outward. They are social and they relate to others instinctively. This style is concerned with relationships and teamwork, and they're generally responsive, flexible. They appreciate flexibility, and they're enthusiastic, especially when something new is coming up. They're really enthusiastic about new things. And for communicators, fair means appropriate. So I'll expand on that in just a minute, but fair means appropriate for communicators. So next we'll move around and think about thinkers. So thinkers are often more quiet and selectively sociable, right? So thinkers are on that people side, but they're not necessarily going to be out and about talking to a lot of people at once. They're more selectively sociable, maybe in smaller groups or one-on-one. They're insightful and creative. Typically, they're great listeners and very caring. And thinkers tend to like concepts, theories, and innovation. And they're all about harmony and steadiness. So change can be challenging for this style. And so I want to just kind of draw back to that shorthand that we saw earlier. Remember, doers kind of focus on, they work with their hands in the physical world. Well, opposite of that is thinkers, where it's more conceptual. It's not so much, getting in and doing things necessarily, but it's those concepts. And then finally, analyticals are generally driven by compliance and doing things right. They care about detail and facts. They want to know the facts and take the time to know the facts, whereas doers might like details, but they just don't have time for it, right? Analyticals are going to take the time to know about the detail and the facts, and they are typically very literal. So analytical people like to approach things systematically, and you'd probably find them to be organized, cautious, and interested in calculated risks. We saw a number of people who described themselves as organized earlier, and so this is probably the area that resonates for you. But remember earlier with communicators, I said fair means appropriate. For analyticals, fair means equal. And so again, I think that's a really interesting distinction when you're going kind of across the grid and looking at how people are very opposite and different. Communicators really want flexibility versus analyticals. Man, if there's a right way to do it, let me know, because that's the way I want to do it. And fair means equal versus with communicators, fair is just what's appropriate. All right. So now that we've layered on that usual behavior, has anything changed for you? Is there a different style that now feels like it's resonating for you more, or are you still kind of in that same, just based on what you heard from the shorthand? Autumn says, nope, she's still right there where she was with the shorthand. Good. What about others? What are you thinking? Okay, Amy, it didn't change. Shanda's still a thinker, but also analytical now. That doesn't surprise me. It seems like in finance, Shanda, that would, I would expect there to probably be a lot of analytical people in finance. Okay, so yeah, most of you are saying it didn't really change. Marianne, though, also has communicator into it. Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, we are gonna move forward into our lunchbox challenge now. And I have a couple of poll questions. So I want to just see, now that you heard that information, let's just kind of do a little bit of a knowledge check. So I'm going to launch the first question here. And so the question is, which style would be more likely to carefully plan each step before starting a new project? What do you think? Go ahead and select and submit. Let's see what you think. So careful planning is it looks like thinker is growing a little bit. The right answer is analytical, because analytical people really like to think through each step before acting, because that careful planning could really help us prevent mistakes. But the flip side to that is that it could feel really slow to someone who wants to jump right in. So for those of you that were selecting thinker, I can see how that sounds right as well, because we're kind of thinking about concepts and that sort of thing. But when it comes to really carefully planning each step, that's going to be more the analytical person. Okay, got another one for you. Let me find the next one here. Okay. Next one, which style would most likely be hands-on, no nonsense, and effective under pressure? What do you think? Oh, 100% responses so far are going with doers. And I see some more numbers coming in and it's staying at 100%. So you are absolutely right. Doers are action oriented and they don't mind learning as they go. So they just want to jump in and get started on a project, and they'd be very effective under pressure. Okay, so we're done with that one. Got another one for you. Okay, so which style would be most likely to focus on the big picture and brainstorm possibilities when starting a new project? What do you think on this one? Okay, so we have the majority of people are going with thinker. We have a few people with communicator. Let a couple more people respond. Thinker is the right answer here. So thinkers just naturally focus on ideas and possibilities and the overall vision. But if we think about the flip side too, their approach, just that really conceptual approach, can sometimes feel a little bit too abstract for teammates who want a clear plan or quick action. I feel like I fall into that trap because I am a thinker, and sometimes I have a little bit of a hard time getting real clear on where we need to go. And that's something that as I'm working with other folks who maybe need more clarity, I've got to keep that in mind. Okay, one last one that I'm going to launch here. Okay, when faced with a tough decision, which do you think a communicator would do? Okay, so we've got 7 responses so far and we're at 100%. Consider how it affects people. You are completely right. So communicators just naturally prioritize people. They value collaboration. They're going to listen to team members. And so they really just want to make sure that, man, am I taking everything into account for the people? Good job, everyone. So you can go ahead and close those out. That's it for our polls. But now I want to take you just a little bit further in thinking about the different styles with Birkman, because when we're thinking about bridging differences, it's important not only that we start to understand these different approaches and perspectives and where people are coming from, but also I want to understand the strengths, right? I want to be aware of man, what do these different styles bring to the table, and how might that complement my work style? So let's take a look. For doers, doers are action-oriented, they're down to earth, and they are effective under pressure. So we heard that just a minute ago as we were going through the quiz questions. Doers can make quick decisions, they're clear communicators, and they get things done. So the fact that they move quickly and prioritize results can really help teams gain momentum. And that's huge, right? I mean, if we have a team of people who are just thinking up ideas but aren't able to really take action, that's a problem for a team. Next, let's look at communicators. So communicators prioritize people. They value collaboration, they listen to other team members and ensure that everyone is feeling included. Their focus on relationships helps to create a positive, cohesive team environment. Thinkers are creative. They naturally focus on ideas and possibilities and the overall vision. They like to step back and just see how everything fits together before diving into the details. And so this can kind of help spark creativity and innovation. And then finally, analytical people. So analyticals thrive on structure. They naturally focus on details and accuracy, and they can help other styles really kind of zero in on what's important. They like to think through each step before acting because that careful planning is going to help them prevent mistakes. And as part of a team, it can be really valuable to work with people who have different strengths than you do. Of course, we all know that because it can really help us ensure that we are approaching things from all angles. That's not to say that work may not be challenging when we're dealing with some differences. I was thinking about, as I was getting ready for this session, a work relationship that I had many years ago when I worked at Cabela's, and I was in system administration. So it was kind of a technical job. And I worked with somebody who always was asking very detailed questions of me. And it made me crazy. So I owned this system and I was training people on this system, and he was always asking really detailed questions that I had never thought of. And it drove me crazy until I started to realize, wow, this guy could really help me be more prepared than I am just naturally in the way that I do things. And so I started bringing him in to test things. I would have him read my documentation ahead of time to make sure that I was covering all of the important things. And so that was a super important relationship for me because I was able to find how what his strengths were could complement mine. And even though it started out where I maybe didn't have a great appreciation because he was making me work harder, right, by asking me all these questions. But in the long run, I recognized that it was going to make the end product stronger if I brought him in. So that's my personal story. I actually have a number of personal stories, but I think that that's a really good one. And just to clarify, I mean, I'm a thinker, and I was working with this guy before I knew anything about Birkman, but now I know that he was certainly an analytical, and he helped me to really get into the detail. Okay, so a few minutes ago, you shared a style or styles that you connect with, the ones that you think probably reflect your approach. So here's what I'd like you to do next before we close this out. I want you to think about one of the other styles. So just pick one of the other styles that is not representative of your own approach, and think about how their approach could complement your style. Okay, so how could partnering with another style make you more effective? Take a minute to think about that and just pop your ideas into chat. Okay, so listening to other ideas and considering their feelings before you just move forward would be good. Thanks, Marianne. Shanda desperately needs doers. You know what? That's one of the other ones that really comes to mind for me, Shanda, because I have in my past also just had a great work partner that was a doer, and man, that was one of the best partnerships that I had. So RJ, doers give you a much needed nudge. That's great. Oh, Bridget, I get it. Yeah, being analytical can cause paralysis. So having a doer on board. Yeah. Yep. Love that. All right. Well, please keep your thoughts coming. But I want to close out so that we can keep moving on. So, today we went over these just kind of natural styles. I hope that this gave you some insight or maybe a little bit of perspective about different behavior styles that you might not have known before. But also I want to put in a little bit of a plug for our December session of Elevate Your Impact, because we're going to build on this. That session is communicating effectively. And so we will take these Birkman styles and build on it to think about how can we communicate effectively with different styles. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. That was very insightful. Definitely got my wheels turning. And I appreciate how you laid all that out. Want to shift gears a little bit and hear from a couple of colleagues, because recognizing with both of our vast organizations, the city and the county, there's a lot of expertise and a lot of great work happening already day to day. So what I'm going to do is let me share my screen. And okay. So, we've talked about a little bit of the intrapersonal or the inner. We've talked about interpersonal, maybe interacting with other individuals. Really want to focus more a little bit on like the intergroup and kind of the larger scale when we talk about a department or an agency. So I was inspired by, I have been for a long time, by some of the work going on in, let me get this technology going. Okay. Going on with the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department. And in particular, I want to welcome Maria Elena and Eunice. They've taken the time to join us here today. So Eunice and Maria Elena, you can feel free to come off mute, and just want to say welcome. Thank you for being here. And I understand you're both going to share a little bit of insights from a couple of questions that we have as we talk about bridging differences and some of the work that you both have been doing, both within your respective roles, but also within a group called ECHO. So with that said, I will turn things over to you and pose kind of the first question as you introduce yourself too, is if you can give us just a quick reminder of what kinds of work happens at the health department. I know a lot of us may come from other departments or agencies, and also just a quick overview of what exactly is ECHO. So feel free to come off mute, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, RJ, and thank you, Christy. Thank you, everyone. This has been a very engaging session. Quick reminder, the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department, located at 3131 O Street, if you haven't been there, promotes public health and well-being for the whole community. And we do that through various programs. We have the disease prevention program. So that's where you have our community health services. You have clinics where we do screenings and testings. The health promotion team, where we look at smoke-free policies. We look at child safety. We have emergency preparedness. If you have pets, you probably have gotten your license from animal control. Environmental health. This is where we talk about recycle, hazardous waste. We talk about food inspection and getting permits, and also health equity. So there are various ways the health department promotes public health and well-being. And ECHO, which is the Equity Committee on Health Outcomes, is a group within the health department that makes sure that all the health outcomes are equitable for all populations. We currently have 9 members on the team, and we contribute to trainings, both mandatory and optional trainings. We have communication within and outside. We have internal and external collaborations, and just different ways of ensuring that the services that are provided by the health department are equitable across board, and they are addressing any disparities that might exist within our community. So that's LLCHD and ECHO.
Thank you, Eunice. That was a fantastic job explaining a lot of that. And want to pose a question to Maria Elena. Given that health department is fairly large and does a vast array of services and very public facing, can you speak to any of the kinds of differences that can sometimes arise when dealing with that nature of work and the teams that are within health?
This is a great question. Maria Elena Villasante, I'm the Health Equity Initiatives Coordinator at the Health Department. One of the challenges, especially in doing our work, which is very broad from different divisions, we have 7 divisions in the Health Department, all of us committed to provide public safety. However, internally, the Health Department has different teams, different programs, and each program have different goals. There is so many levels of expertise and perspective. And so that's why it's very important for us. As Eunice mentioned, we have ECHO, and that ECHO in itself is our representatives from different 7 divisions, but it's also had to be diverse enough in age, gender, and cultural backgrounds. So we have a common, I would say, very diverse but comprehensive worldview of our own world in the health department. So in addressing the differences among different programs and divisions, one of the things that we value is the communication styles. Some teams, different divisions might prefer a formal communication, like, for example, emails and reports, and other teams might prefer more informal or more interactive approaches, like, for example, meetings, direct conversations, staffings where they can gain understanding from each other. On our end, also, it's very important to create a cultural awareness of the public that we serve. And so some teams may have higher knowledge and experience and training in cultural competency, while other teams may need that. And so also, some programs may have more resources to address the needs of their own programming, and other teams, they might not have the same luxury. And so that is also a difference that we have observed in different programs, and also the approaches to health equity. Some teams are more, health equity is their top priority, like, for example, our home visitors, that they have to interact with different community members and also need interpreting devices to do their work. And others may not have to focus on that specifically, but also have bigger tasks, like, for example, environmental hazards or different disease prevention. So they're different teams.
Thank you for that. And can you speak to maybe some of the strategies, tactics, and types of efforts that ECHO has done to help play a role in bridging some of the differences that may have arisen, both whether it be internal or public facing?
Yes. So Marilena mentioned that one of the differences that we've noticed in the health department is varying levels of cultural awareness. And one way ECHO has helped in bridging that is introducing trainings, which could be optional or mandatory. Now, one of the training methods we have employed is having cultural panels. These panels come up during our all staff meetings where we invite the community from different backgrounds to share their experiences, their challenges, especially with accessing healthcare, which is what we do at the health department, and just making everyone aware that these are the things the community needs, and this is how we can address those things with cultural competency in mind. Other things we do is ensuring that there's an open communication channel. Everyone has different communication styles. So ECHO tries to make sure that we are encouraging different channels that people can use. So we talk about emails, Power DMS. We have an ECHO newsletter that has a way of us sharing information to staff, but also encouraging feedback from staff. Just a sidebar, people love puzzles and word searches. So every time we put those in newsletters, we get a lot of feedback. So that way we make communication engaging, we make it fun, and people are encouraged to actually share what they have in mind. Something else ECHO does is encouraging cross collaboration. We have a way of saying, okay, we have different teams here. How about the teams collaborate on things? We work with the epidemiology team. I mentioned earlier that our goal is to address health disparities. Now, how do we do that? How do we encourage different teams to do that? We show them data. This is the data that's available, and this is how we're going to address the disparities that are shown from that data that we've received. We also encourage people, different teams, to share what they do. It's very possible when you have 7 divisions that you have little or no idea what the other division is doing. And if that's the case, it's very easy to have even more differences. If I don't know what animal control does, or if I don't know how food inspectors get their job done, there's little way I can understand them or work with them. So we encourage theme sharing, and that's one of the things we do from the ECHO perspective. We get teams to share highlights of what they do, and then we put that out to the whole health department. That way you're getting more information on what each team does, and you know how you can work with them better.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Let's see here. And Maria Elena and Eunice too, for bridging differences. When you've seen tangible results happen, I guess, how have you seen that then impact, or what does that lead to with a team's ability to not only function as a team, but provide that quality service to the greater community?
I really love Christy's presentation because it gave me a better understanding why are we so effective in doing this. And I think respect inside the teams and understanding what style they have is very powerful. So I think like improve a coordination. When we understand each other's strengths, needs, and perspectives, we can better coordinate efforts and to avoid duplication of services or duplicated work. So basically, we are more efficient in serving our community. I think that will be one gain of it. Another gain will be a better problem solving. Like when we consider diverse ideas and also when we leverage those differences, we can generate more innovative solutions to public challenges. I think that's a gain. And the other two, I would think like creating an inclusive decision making. When we bridge internal differences, we can have a better inclusive perspective, and also we can align our policies and services which can be more relevant to our communities. And finally, I would say we can gain a stronger relationship with the public when we all have our aligned strategies and we're unified in a consistent message to the public. So I think gaining trust and increasing community engagement in our communities is very, very important. And I will say when we do these things, the ultimate goal is for us to become more agile, more ultimately gain trust and respectful of those.
Hello,
We
this
can
is
be more
Ron.
inclusive, we can be more effective in serving
Yes, dear.
diverse population in our county.
Oh, perfect. Thank you for that. Really appreciate hearing that, and thank you both for the work you're doing for the Lincoln and Lancaster County community. And thank you for sharing your expertise today. Definitely invite everybody to keep tabs on all the awesome things happening in the health department. I know we're at time, so we'll start wrapping things up. I do have a survey for you all before you leave. I'll also share out some information regarding this Sunday is the Lincoln Unites community event. The community is leading this event at 12 p.m. There's going to be a special announcement there from the city of Lincoln, so check that out. We have some upcoming lunch and learns that I do want to invite you all to consider attending. You can find more information on that in the training calendar through the HR intranet page. Just look for the learning page and you can find the training calendar on there. And last but not least, please let us know how we're doing. Survey on there, and we'll also try to put the link in the chat. Thank you, Eunice. Thank you, Maria Elena. Thank you, Christy, for sharing the lesson today. And thank you, everybody, for joining today's Elevate Your Impact session. Appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.